This is an interview I'm really looking forward to because you are a tenant at Harlem Works and you do a practice called solution focused practice. And we're going to have a quick conversation about how that works. And in particular, I'm going to pick your brains about what we could learn from that approach for small business owners that are facing all the turmoil, which is COVID-19. So I've rushed ahead and introduced you there, but do you just want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, it's lovely to be here too with you, Sophie, and thank you for creating this opportunity so we can have this chat because it helps me revisit the ideas in this unique time. So I'm Naomi Whitehead, and I'm a solution-focused coach, therapist, and trainer. And obviously, you'll find out more about that approach during the course of this call. And I support individuals and organisations in the voluntary, public, and private sector to operate as their best selves, essentially, and to notice what helps them to do that in a very sort of respectful and compassionate way.
So that, I love the positivity of the approach there. So do you want to start out by sort of explaining the big picture of the philosophy behind it and how the solution focused practice seeks to work?
Yeah, so solution focused practice was sort of conceptualized in the 80s by the founders Insu Kimberg and Steve DeShazer, who were building on a multitude of different approaches at that time, like narrative therapy, systemic therapy, Milton Erickson's hypnosis. But essentially what
I'm nodding, but I don't know anything about that, but I'm just nodding along as if I do. So it comes out of a very well respected background.
Yeah, and a variety of sort of different psychological approaches, although now we all use it within organisations and in organisational change as much as we do in the therapy world. But yeah, Insu Kimberg and Steve DeShazer basically were alongside colleagues, spent thousands and thousands of hours analysing therapy, coaching and counselling sessions with a one-way mirror to analyse and notice exactly what was said that seemed to make a positive difference to the clients in those moments. So we call it now kind of micro-analysis, but noticing which questions led to the clients talking about what they wanted, which was a radical shift from all of the helping professions previously to the solution focused approach, which had always focused on the problem, what's wrong. So solution focused practice is about focusing on what's right and building from it as a platform and noticing what people do that's useful to them and that works, and how they can do things slightly differently to do more of what works, and how by visualizing and imagining and describing their preferred future, the way they'd like either their business or their life or their personality or their relationship to be, by describing how they want it to be, and then noticing what they're doing now that's useful and thinking about progress towards that was more useful than analysing what was wrong, which took a long time.
And one of the things that I've heard you say is that it can work in quite short periods of time. So like it doesn't necessarily have to go on for a very long time to be an effective approach for somebody.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And I think that's what's really powerful about it. So the people that brought the solution focused approach over to the UK, Chris Ison, Harvey Ratner and Evan George actually call their company, they brought it over in the late 80s, early 90s, after meeting Stephen Insu, and they actually call their company Brief in capitals because
Right.
it's a brief, quite simple, quite logical approach. Yeah, actually it's quite difficult to master, and it has really powerful transformative capacities because we do as human beings naturally think about what's wrong and what we don't want and what's frustrating us and how to move from there, instead of thinking in this really linear way of actually better would be this and this is how I'm going to get there. So I think the style of it just invites people to move towards change, desired change more quickly.
So today, for example, for small businesses in Sheffield is quite an anxious day because the council has started to release this grant funding that's available to some businesses, and I feel quite anxious about knowing which tenants are going to get it, whether it's all going to go smoothly. So in this period of great uncertainty, staying positive can sometimes be quite challenging, but nonetheless it feels much more helpful to be positive than it does to be stressed and negative. What's your sort of take on how small business owners could be taking this approach and helping them to get through the uncertainty that we're struggling with at the moment?
So I think to begin with, it's really important for people to acknowledge and accept the situation exactly as it is and see it exactly as it is. I think if we're really honest about facing things as they truly are, then again, change is easier. And then moving, I think, sort of in anticipating today's conversation, I think if people can take a sort of 20 minutes to walk around or move around in their house or take a few deep breaths before doing what I'm about to suggest, because I think that movement can kind of shift some sort of stuck energy, which can make you just think, oh, I can't do anything, I'm really anxious. And I understand what it's like to be that anxious, particularly in these times. So just something to shift them slightly, and then to take a moment and with a pen and paper and to just write down and to dare to imagine, and this isn't saying this is realistic or achievable, but this particular activity can and nearly always is useful, to write down a scale with 0 at the bottom, 10 at the top on a piece of paper, and to write down at number 10 a description of what their business would look like with or without the COVID-19 situation, if it was going how they wanted it to go, and to sort of discipline themselves. And this can feel, I think, awkward. So I'm inviting people to trust me and sort of push through that awkwardness and do it, and just write down 10 things about what would be happening if their business was going how they wanted it to. Maybe in spite of COVID-19. So who would be there? Would it be just them as a sole trader? Would they be interacting with colleagues? How would they be interacting? What kind of business would they be selling or doing? Or what would a typical day look like? And to put as much detail around number 10 as they possibly can. And then for people to imagine where they are right now in this moment in a really honest way in relation to that 10. And I can really imagine right now people watching this will be thinking, well, I'm 0. Which is entirely natural because it's it's a really challenging situation. Um, and even if you write, oh, well, I'm at 0 in relation to my 10, having done the 10 will have told you, will tell people a little bit about what they value and about what's important and what's a priority, whether or not it's achievable. And by looking at 0, or maybe people will notice they're higher than that, I'd like people, or I'd recommend to people to then write down 10 reasons that they're managing to be there and no lower. So if somebody's at 0, how are they managing to be at 0 and not minus?
Right.
For example, right now, this week, they have still got their home, or there is a possibility they're going to secure a mortgage holiday, or if they don't get grant funding, there might be something else. So reasons that people are at that number. And then the sort of next part of the scale is if people can write down what they would notice themselves and things that are within their control that they might be doing, thinking, feeling, or noticing over the next few days that might get them from wherever they are, even if it's a 0, from a 0 to a 1, or from a 5 to a 6. And it's about being really specific, I think, and acknowledging any existing resources. So if somebody is really feeling like they're sinking at the moment, who is it that they could speak to that they feel comfortable with, that is somebody that even if they have to kind of bare their soul a little bit, they'll feel okay afterwards? So who could they reach out to? Or could they offer some free services at the moment, because it's a way of using their time meaningfully? It might lead to new business. And if it doesn't lead to new business, maybe it's a way of spending your time doing something you enjoy, and it can justify getting in contact with an organisation, which means you can share the experience. So it's about thinking of tiny, small, concrete actions, thoughts, behaviours, and feelings at whatever number you are now, to kind of progress tiny bit higher. And when I say 10, I think the devil's in the detail again, because you get to about 4 and think, I can't think of anything else. And what I've noticed for 17 years of doing this is that it's about 8 or 9 when people are looking at me going, oh, you're really annoying me, I don't want to do this activity. And I say, please trust me. And about 8 or 9, they go, oh, I could do that. And that would be useful. And then the last part of this that I would say is invite people to try and bring to mind a time, even in the last 10 years, where they've coped with something incredibly difficult, and what they did at that time, and what other people noticed them doing at that time that was useful. So people to kind of try, even when you're feeling overwhelmed, to notice your unique qualities and capacities, even if you only feel like you've got one at the moment. But what is it? What is it that you're really good at, no matter what, and how could you use it?
So I really love that, because I love the idea of starting on the 10, because that's very uplifting. and exciting for me. I'm always really excited about potential for businesses and where they could be. So I kind of like could have a little holiday from all the COVID stuff and just dream about how it could be, which would be great. And then also I love the idea that if you're focusing on these, it's sort of like a brainstorming, isn't it? Coming up with 10 ideas rather than just one or two. And traditionally people have to really push through to think outside the box a bit. So your 10 is really pushing people to kind of think of these more than just the obvious that springs to
Yeah,
mind. And then to kind of work your way, presumably then if you've got that, you start to see something that butches you up the scale and allows you to do a small thing now, which makes you positive progress.
exactly that. And I think what you said then about the uncomfortable bit, the other thing to add to that is, really insightful, you've noticed that, is if people believe in neuroplasticity and our neural pathways, that you're firing new pathways to live, do business, think differently, slightly differently, that's hard work. So the reason it becomes uncomfortable is because you're potentially firing a new pathway to think really differently and in a unique or innovative way to build a solution in a unique time such as COVID-19. So that's another kind of reason to do that.
And one of the things that I noticed from the point of view of like being a landlady and having more than 20 different people running businesses in the building is that everybody is unique in how they respond to the at the moment it's everybody's suffering from COVID, but affects people's businesses differently. But also I noticed that people have different ways of managing those external threats. And so sometimes it can be about shifting something in your approach, which can allow you to see a possibility that perhaps wasn't obvious when you were sort of overcome by anxiety about paying the mortgage and paying the rent and those kinds of things. So that seems a very powerful approach. Have you sort of applied it in business life for yourself? How do you find it helpful for you? And because you're growing, you've moved in, you've got a small starter space, really, as it were, and you're starting to grow your business, and this has hit you at a difficult time. So how has it been for you?
Well, I think I've had the business as it is now for 5 years, but then it's really shifted and, like you said, blossomed since moving to Harlem Works, which I'm really
Yeah.
delighted about. So I think it's a very creative place and I think it's very supportive, but also things run smoothly here and things run in a kind of organized, quite minimalist way, which really connects to my solution focused approach. And I think things like the event space that you're doing the interview from now is really uplifting and open, and that draws people in. So that's been really wonderful. And I think feeling part on the WhatsApp group of the Harlem Works community and the way you've responded and trying to support us financially to work our way through this has made a huge difference to me and made me feel confident and part of a team. I've been working with Brian Thornton, who owns Solution Focus Sheffield, for 5 years, and now being at Harlem Works feels like another layer to that kind of teamwork for Naomi Whitehead training. But I would say it's been a really interesting few weeks. When it first hit, I thought, oh my goodness, maybe I'm going to go bankrupt. And I think to connect back to the solution focused approach, it's based in the kind of yogic principles that the only two certainties in life are change and death. So, and that's not to be morbid, but change is certain.
Yeah.
And from doing really tiny things slightly differently, big change can happen. So when I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to go bankrupt, what's going to happen? I'm feeling very uncertain and concerned about the health of my loved ones. I then discovered or sort of opened up to the possibility of, well, what is achievable within this? So my first step was just to contact all of my clients, some of whom I do work with on Zoom, but to contact all of my clients who I do coaching and therapy with and say, would you be happy to work over Zoom? And try to create that opportunity really quickly so that people felt and recognised the service could continue. And then I did something that sort of connected to my values, which is I sort of openly opened up all of my coaching and therapy services online, available to anyone for a small donation of what they could afford during this time.
Wow.
So for example, for key workers or for people socially isolated. So it was like doing something practical with clients. And the organizational team development solution focus work I do, explaining to them, actually, I can provide this on Zoom. So that was something tangible, and then something that felt important with the values. And I think the combination of those two things just meant that sort of positive change started to happen. And actually nearly all of my clients are continuing the work. And then this 5-day certificate course inspired by my colleagues Tara Gretton and John Wheeler, who I'm in the company Solution Focused Trainers with, said we can still do 5 days online. And so
Wow.
we've done that. And then
So you've taken a 5-day training course that was a face-to-face training course and is important for your business, and you've just moved it online.
yeah,
That is amazing, isn't it? Well
it's
done. That's a big shift.
and there's unexpected benefits to that. So of course I was initially almost instantly grieving that face-to-face contact and that human connection. But actually Tara Gretton in Bath is very much about the human connection, and she just went full steam ahead within the first week. So we all run this 5-day qualification for anyone, whether they're in business or therapy or who can want to train in learning the solution focused approach. She went full steam ahead and said, I'm going to just do it. I've got my course starting next week. And it went brilliantly. And she said there was still that connection.
Yeah.
And she said people went into breakout rooms and they could still talk without her as a facilitator. And it was a really uplifting 2 days. But what was I going to say then? Oh, but the unexpected other part of this has been that there's been somebody in Ireland, 2 people in Birmingham and someone in London who've been wanting to do this course for years and not had the opportunity because the dates and locations haven't fit. And now I've got all of these new bookings for my 5-day course from people that couldn't previously do it. So this colleague I met in Ireland in a conference in Europe, in Bulgaria, said, oh, now I can do it. So I suppose, I mean, that's a particularly fortunate time. And I'm not saying to people, this is going to happen for everyone. And I'm not saying it's secure because who knows what the next few months will bring. I'm just saying being open to the possibility that small changes can have a big impact sometimes, and if they don't, try something completely different.
But what I love about that as well is it just fits. So you've looked at your 10, and then you've looked at the reality of where you are, and you've just tried to make small shifts to get a little bit further up that scale, and done those 3 things that you mentioned, and then you've not closed the lid on a possibility. You've just opened up, and then things that you wouldn't have expected have happened. Which if somebody had taken a more traditional business planning approach where they know that something will happen and they do X to get to Y, it wouldn't have happened like that, because you wouldn't necessarily have expected you don't know these opportunities are coming, so you can't really plan for them. You're just doing what you can do and seeing what opens up.
Yes. And it's that agility and that responsiveness that this approach does give you, I think, and gives all of us. But also what you said then about that traditional business planning approach, people have put pressure on me about that on and off for years. And I said, my business is growing in spite of not having. And I had so I get my own solution focused therapy and coaching, and Tara was doing some with me. And we would discover that one of my unique sort of particular parts of my character is about being very spontaneous.
Yeah.
And realizing that accepting that instead of going, oh, I want to be more businessy, accepting that I'm quite spontaneous and using that to that thing, that quality that comes naturally, using that to grow my business and sort of harnessing the energy. I suppose I would say to people, it can be their most unexpected of qualities that in some contexts people might say is a negative.
Yeah.
But if you sort of go, well, because usually people's greatest superpowers are a weakness at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's about sort of using them in the right way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like I'm really sensitive, so I can get a bit paranoid, but it makes me a good trainer and therapist.
And I really do see that in the way that different people run their businesses. You can really see that stuff that they're really good at, which is what the business is based on, can also be the thing that slightly holds them back from doing things a bit differently when they need to. So yeah, it's really interesting. So I mean, that sounds a great approach, and I love the fact that you're offering your services as well. So if anybody wanted to get in contact with you and find out more about that, how would they do that?
So if they just go onto my website, it's Naomi, so Naomi Whitehead Training.org. If you just Google Naomi Whitehead Training, it's all one word.org, then they'll find me. And the information's there, and it's just really easy to get into contact with me, phone, mobile, on the contact form on the website.
Yeah. And we'll have to see how the next few weeks pan out and how it develops for you, and also how it develops for everybody else at Harlem Works, which obviously I'm crossing my fingers for, because it is a very uncertain time. So it's really nice to have some tenants who are able to be flexible and think positively in the face of such challenging circumstances. So it's great to have you around, Naomi. Great to have a positive positive face.
Oh, thank you. And I think, the support you offered at the very beginning, Sophie, took the pressure off and made me feel like more was possible.
Well, that's
because I instantly, and I think all of us probably instantly heard, okay, we are tenants in an environment where we can discuss and negotiate and plan, and it's flexible,
yeah,
which instantly increased my loyalty and then my confidence. And that's, I think, the other thing I'd say to people is, whatever it takes in the mornings to increase your confidence a bit and to feel calmer, do it.
yeah. Confidence is a massive part of the picture, isn't it? Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and I think sometimes being part of a connected community does help with confidence, because you can get down a rabbit hole on your own. So if you can, I've enjoyed coming in, I've been doing work on the building and stuff, and there's a few people still working in isolation, obviously, but in their offices, and just seeing some friendly faces around, even at a 2 meter distance and just passing by, has been really, really helpful. So yeah, being part of a community at these times can be really, really helpful. Cool, that's great, Naomi. So I'm going to share this with people, just hope that it gives them some inspiration, some positive news, and just advocate that they get in touch with you if they want to explore further your approach, because it sounds really good, really fit for the times.
Oh, thanks, Sophie.
Thank you very much. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.